Hello friends, it's Mike Williams. As promised, here is the Vivian Stanshall and Phil Ackrill analysis. Memoirs tells us that Viv and Phil are not real people, but fictional characters played by Billy. With this presentation, we will take a deep dive into this admittedly controversial claim and see if it can be true. Did Billy play Vivian Stanshall and Phil Ackrill? Inquiring minds want to know. As with all my presentations, this video is geared toward those folks who are well versed in the McCartney conspiracy. For those just getting into Paul is Dead, I posted links in the description box below to help introduce you to the topic. The comments section is open, so please feel free to share your feedback and thoughts. If you are a troll, you will be banned from the channel. If you are in deep denial and steadfastly want to believe the Beatle myth, then this presentation is not for you. For everyone else, let's take another trip down the McCartney rabbit hole. And with that, let's get started. Per Memoirs, Vivian Stanshall and Phil Ackrill are characters created by Bill. If this were not true, legal action could be brought forth by a number of interested parties which include Paul McCartney, the Vivian Stanshall estate, and Phil Ackrill. However, to the best of my knowledge, there is no such legal action. Therefore, it is reasonable to assume the accounts in memoirs regarding Stanshall and Ackrill are truthful, meaning they are not real people and are indeed characters created by Billy. Another clue pointing to Billy being the source of the content contained in memoirs is the book Sleeve, where Billy is shown along with Tom Harriet. If memoirs were not Billy telling us his story, it is highly likely the McCartney enterprise would prohibit use of likeness without permission. Another clue is the book's foreword, which was written by George Martin's son Gregory Martin, who also did the voiceover for the 9 After 909 audiobook. Another validation of Billy's direct involvement in memoirs is the use of Beatles songs and lyrics throughout the book. Without approval to use these songs, legal action could be initiated to address copyright infringement. And it's not just Billy's songs in the book, but songs by Biological Paul, The Who, The Rolling Stones, Donovan, and Elton John. Now, the book does state it is categorized as historical fiction, and this was done, as explained in memoirs, to navigate around potential legal issues which could arise if the narrative was deemed to breach non-disclosure and confidentiality agreements, specifically those signed by Billy. But here's a clue for everyone. The quote-unquote fiction in memoirs is not what most people think. The fictional component is a nuanced thread that runs through the book. And it goes along these lines. What you do not or will not believe defines what is fictional. In a future presentation, I will explain this in more detail. In my December 2018 presentation, The Beatles, Paul McCartney, and the Grand Illusion, I proposed the following theory which I presented after receiving information from a source. There were two primary replacements put in place by the controllers before Biological Paul's demise. One replacement, who was Billy, was a highly skilled musician and performer, and the other version of Paul was an actor rolled out for public consumption. I refer to the public version of Paul's replacement as Street Paul. It is my hypothesis that Street Paul's transformation to look like Biological Paul was ahead of Billy's transformation. Per the 9 After 909 edition of Memoirs on page 178, Billy tells us Tavistock rolled out their very best double for the Melody Maker Awards, which took place on September 13, 1966. I believe this very best double was Street Paul. It is my opinion that it is possible he is the version of Paul we see in Magical Mystery Tour, especially when Paul was shown in close-up camera shots. Other times, when the camera shot or angle was less discerning or further away, like when the band was performing, we are looking at Billy with the help of latex and cosmetics. And it is important to remember foam latex has been used extensively since the 1930s within the film industry. The Wizard of Oz is a great example. By the time we get to 1967 or 37 years later, its application was quite advanced. Aside from playing Paul, Billy also makes an appearance as Vivian Stanshall in Magical Mystery Tour. Stanshall appearing in the film was a clue to let us know that Billy is the performer version of Paul. Along with Billy and Street Paul, there were other actors playing the McCartney character as they paged in and out during the timeline in order to further muddy the waters and to keep the masses bamboozled. The use of permanent replacements, along with actors playing the role, is a template the controllers use. It's very straightforward when you think about it. Put in play at least two replacements who are transformed to look like the original person by applying surgeries, latex, fillers, and cosmetics, along with deploying lookalikes so that a composite persona is created for public consumption. In other words, they created a blended representation of what Paul McCartney looks like. This blended view conditions the public to accept what they are shown. My theory was validated when the 9 after 909 edition of Memoirs explained how the Stanshall character was also played by two primary replacements, one of which was Billy. It's also important for me to note that my two primary replacement theory was published before the new edition of Memoirs shipped, and I had no foreknowledge of what was in the updated book. Now let's read Tom's footnote on page 84 to understand how Billy set the stage for his Stanshall character to coexist with his role as McCartney. Here's a footnote from page 84 of the 9 after 909 edition of Memoirs. This note will be clearer after reading the note in chapter 39, which will be the next slide.
William remained active in his Vivian Stanshall role up until Linda's doctor discovered her cancer. With her condition on his mind, he could no longer do the Viv role, which was all about zany fun. In light of Linda's impending death, William wanted to retire the Vivian position to kill off that fictional persona. He met with the actor who had been living as Viv for all those years and offered him a retirement package that would keep him on the payroll but would have him mildly alter his appearance, relocate, return to his original name, and agree to cease all further acting and musical performances. The 51-year-old actor living as Vivian flatly refused William's offered retirement package, saying, "Over my dead body." He said that he had built his life and family around that character and would never give it up, with or without William's money. He had so integrated his own life story into his Vivian role that giving up that position would have felt like death to him. To William's astonishment, before resolving the matter, the Viv actor was found dead on the morning of March 6, 1995. An electrical fire had broken out as he slept on his top-floor flat in Muswell Hill, North London. Honoring the Vivian role by William and the double, a memorial plaque was unveiled in Poets' Corner of Golders Green Crematorium on December 13, 2015, opposite that of the actor's widow Quay Longfellow Stanshall and daughter Silky Longfellow Stanshall, along with one of William's close friends from The Who, Keith Moon. Keith had spent his last evening out with Paul and Linda just a few hours before his September 7, 1978 death.
Now let's move to the footnote in chapter 39 on page 390.
William used the role of Phil Ackrill before giving it, attempting to lease it, to Philip Ralston, while reserving the option to still do performances occasionally and to give recording assistance. Ralston, the new Phil Ackrill, enthusiastically received the role in hopes of a recording contract. When that contract failed to materialize, William lost interest in the band, leaving the role entirely to Ralston, who later likewise became discouraged, quit the band, and pursued a career outside of the music industry. Although William says he invented the Phil Ackrill role, the name appears to have been suggested to William by an associate of Ralston's mother. William's role as Vivian Stanshall likewise involved another performer, and was likewise less profitable than William intended. Unlike the Ackrill role, William never completely left the Stanshall role to another. As William originally set it up, he would collect a modest fraction of each Vivian engagement that was done in William's place. He imagined that the replacement would be a big star, earning enough to live comfortably while also paying William his cut. However, although the new Vivian made some stellar performances, they did not pay well enough to justify the position. Throughout the rest of his life, he was on William's payroll. Although keeping that position going was not financially advantageous, it gave William great pleasure in doing the shows that he wanted and in passing the rest onto the man whom he paid to live as Vivian Stanshall.
Here is an illustration of how Memoirs tells us the Stanshall piece of the puzzle worked. Billy was the version of Viv who played and performed with the Bonzos. The actor/musician hired by Billy to play Stanshall, who I will refer to as Street Viv, geared his performances to more theatrical and eclectic endeavors, such as the 1980 film Sir Henry at Rawlinson End. The differences between Billy's version of Stanshall, who played with the Bonzos, and Street Viv are striking, especially when we look at Billy's Stanshall character without the beard, longer hair, and oversized glasses. Billy's face was longer and narrower than Street Viv, very similar to the facial differences between Billy and biological Paul. At the bottom of the slide, I found other images of Stanshall. I didn't feel comfortable placing them as Billy or Street Viv, and so I concluded it's possible they are most likely lookalikes who paged in and out of the timeline just like the McCartney doubles and lookalikes did. So as we can see, the same template was used for both the Stanshall and McCartney roles. And from the footnote I just read from page 390 of Memoirs, A version of this approach was also used for the Ackrill character. Now, before we continue on, it's important to understand the difference between a birth name and a legal name. This will help to explain how Billy can call himself Paul McCartney and how the actor on Billy's payroll can call himself Vivian Stanshall. A birth name is the family name someone has when he or she is born. A legal name is a person's name that is usually the name given at birth and recorded on the birth certificate, but, and this is very important, it may be a different name that is used by a person consistently and independently, or that has been declared the person's name by a court. So what this means is your birth name can be your legal name, but a legal name does not have to be your birth name. A legal name can also be the designation chosen by a business entity such as a corporation. This is called a corporate fiction. People change their names all the time for various reasons, and here in the US, changing your name to something other than your birth name is not a difficult process. For those who are interested, I will leave a link in the description box below explaining the process on how to change your name. I believe Street Viv legally changed his name from his birth name to the legal name of Vivian Stanshall. Now let's take a moment to understand how Street Viv is technically Vivian Stanshall. Based on memoirs, Billy hired an actor to assume the persona of Stanshall, who I refer to as Street Viv. It is likely the actor legally changed his name, meaning Vivian Stanshall is not his birth name. Going back to page 84 of memoirs, Tom tells us Billy offered Street Viv a retirement package that would keep him on the payroll, but would have him alter his appearance, relocate, return to his original name, and agree to cease all further acting and musical performances. Street Viv was married to Quay Longfellow. When Street Viv's relatives insist he is not McCartney or Billy, they are correct, he is not. The responses by Street Viv's inner circle are nuanced. Technically, if he changed his legal name to Vivian Stanshall, he is Stanshall and not Billy or McCartney. However, the question to ask is this: is Vivian Stanshall his birth name? Is this the name he was given when he was born? Is this the name on his birth certificate? As is always the case, you have to ask the right questions to get to the truth. Now let's take a moment to summarize what we have covered so far. Per memoirs, Vivian Stanshall is not a real person. Vivian Stanshall is not a birth name. In all likelihood, Street Viv used a legal name. Billy used Stanshall as a stage name. Vivian Stanshall is a character created and developed by Billy. There were at least two versions of Stanshall: Performer Viv with the Bonzos, which was Billy, and Street Viv, who was an actor/musician whose real name is unknown. Street Viv was put in place by Billy, so his McCartney and Stanshall character could coexist. Street Viv was on Billy's payroll. Street Viv was the version of Stanshall married to Quay Longfellow. In 1995, Billy wanted to retire the Stanshall character due to Linda's cancer diagnosis. He approached Street Viv with a retirement offer, but Street Viv refused to relinquish the role. Before resolving the matter, Street Viv subsequently died in a fire in March of 1995. Now, as you're listening to this chronology, the timing of Street Viv's death makes one wonder. If you are like me, it did raise an eyebrow, but I will leave it there and move to the next slide. Let's take a look at the many faces of Vivian Stanshall. Pause the video to take a moment and notice the facial features and differences. Just like the McCartney comparison I have shown in a number of presentations, we can see there is more than one person playing Stanshall. It is my assessment that pictures number 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 10 are Billy. In number 10, Billy has donned eye and facial makeup to effeminize his appearance, and images 7, 8, and 9 are Street Viv. In fact, picture number 9 comes from Stanshall's Wikipedia page. The person in image number 5 appears to be a look-alike. Earlier in the presentation, I showed 2 additional Stanshall characters that are not on this slide. As we have seen with my McCartney comparisons, we can clearly see there are 2 different people depicted as Stanshall. Feel free to pause the video to examine the slide some more. The next several slides will compare Billy's version of Stanshall and Street Viv. There will be no voiceover for these slides. I will just play the slideshow and give you time to study the images. I will resume the voiceover after these slides are presented. That concludes the slideshow, and I trust you noticed the differences between Bonzo Viv and Street Viv. In a previous video, I included this slide, which is a drawing John Lennon did. Setting aside the right foot with the cocked big toe, like we see with the version of McCartney on the Abbey Road album cover, we see Lennon sketched a picture of what certainly appears to be Vivian Stanshall. This is very interesting. And notice what's written on the sketch. Why not? I will suggest John was telling us Billy is a version of Vivian, specifically the version of Vivian with the Bonzo Dog Band. Here's an image of the McCartney character I found which has a striking resemblance to the Bonzo version of Stanshall. Notice the shape of the mouth, which is identical, the front teeth, and the shape of the eyes. With this slide, we can compare 3 images of Billy's Stanshall with his McCartney character. This time, note the hair and again the eyes. This is the same person. Please pause the video to take a closer look. This photo, which was sourced from Tom Harriot's website, shows 2 photos which were shot the same week for Magical Mystery Tour. And here's the quote from page 300 of Billy's back. Notice how different my eyebrows look when I sing as Paul from when I sang as Vivian Stanshall. I sing with my eyebrows pushed up for Paul and sing with them pushed firmly down for Vivian. The distinction give each their own look. Now let's take a look at video clips comparing the body movement and form of Billy's Bonzo Viv and Street Viv. The things to look for are overall stage presence, body type, body movement, singing voice, and facial differences.
Your film has been very successful in New York, hasn't it, as well as in England?
I have no idea.
Oh, well, I think I can tell you it has. It's sort of been packing them out. Now, you used to be in the Bonzo... Bonzo Dog Doodah band.
Yes.
Now, that was a marvellous band. When did that sort of not exist anymore? How long ago?
1970, we knocked that on the head.
And that's when you started working in films, was it?
Yes. No. No, I spent, no, there were about 10 years in purgatory doing things that had no effect whatsoever. So, I mean, I didn't start working in films until my birthday the year before last, and then the head of Charisma said, make a film, dear boy.
The B-side of that single, sports fans, hope it makes you sick. I don't really mean that, honestly, we're very nice chaps, really.
In the canyons of your mind, I will wander through your brain to the ventricles of your heart, my dear. I'm in love with you again. Cross the mountains of your chest, I will stick a Union Jack.
Take along me tipsy and me daisies, falling down a rubber with a cherry shine, a fine old golden oily rain, me cherry bread and cheese. You won't let up, woman, some geezer, a newly ginger geezer, a geezer with a hoochie rice of pork.
Spend the heavenly day here where the whispering waters play. There's a whippoorwill, he's calling you by a waterfall, he's dreaming too. There's a magic melody Mother Nature sings to me beside a waterfall with you. Now it's your turn.
The differences between Billy and Street Viv are very noticeable to me. The screen captures on this slide are from 2 of the clips I presented. Here are some of the differences I noticed. Their stage presentation is very different. Billy's Vivian has a vaudeville feel to his act, whereas Street Viv is very British, with an almost bohemian look to his performances. Their facial features do not match up. Their stance and posture is very different. Billy is more upright, Street Viv is lankier. Their voices are different. These two people are not the same person. Now let's take a look at some possible occult clues. Here's an image of Billy as Vivian with his Bonzo Dog Band. What struck me with this image was Vivian holding a skull in his hands. Knowing that signs and symbols rule the world and how much Billy likes to drop clues, I thought I would dig a little more and see if I could find the quote-unquote bones part of the equation. Here's an image that comes directly from Stanshall's Wikipedia page. Let's take a look at the caption, which reads, Vivian with his bulldog bones, towpath, Shepperton, England, 1980. For reference, a towpath is a road or trail on the bank of a river, canal, or other inland waterway. Now, what caught my attention are three things. Street Viv had a dog named Bones. Bones was a bulldog. This is a possible clue pointing to the Beatles song Hey Bulldog, where Billy states in memoirs that John wrote the song about Billy. Billy was considered a bulldog because of his drive. Then we see Shepperton, England, and in memoirs, Billy tells us his surname is Shepherd. I guess this can be coincidence, but wait, it gets better. The symbol of the crossed bones creates the letter X, which is pronounced as Quay, or some might pronounce it as Chi or Key. Street Viv's wife is Quay Longfellow. Quay or Ki has the numerical value of 600 in Greek numerals. When we put together Billy's skull and Street Viv's bones, we have skull and bones. The number for skull and bones is 322. 3 times 22 equals 66. When we add the 600 from Quay or the Greek X to the 66 from Skull and Bones, we get 666. I should also note that the Beatles' first album, Please Please Me, was released on March 22nd, 1963. March 22nd is written as 3/22 or 322. Now let's take a look at a brief video from a Street Viv film. In this clip, the other actor in the scene with Viv is very difficult to understand, but I was able to discern and caption Street Viv's dialogue. I found the conversation very interesting. Let's take a listen.
Do you like riddles? Conograms, anagrams, acronyms, teasers, they all are. I'm easy to bend, I begin where I end. I'm soft and I'm pink and I'm shy. I'm legless and armless and hairless and harmless. I'll give you 3 guesses. Who am I? They search for the self, the psyche, the soul, the head and alter ego. God loves sheep, and nudis, verdis, per obscurum, obscurius. The answer is a word. I have 2 guesses left. Keep them by me. There are some things I like things. Horace. He donated his head to the family. Oh.
It certainly appears the occult, especially the Egyptian mysteries, permeate the narrative within the McCartney circle of family and friends. In all likelihood, Street Viv is a Freemason himself, otherwise it would be unlikely Billy would have contracted with him to play the role of Stanshall. So in the clip we have Vivian saying Horace donated his head for the family. I would suggest this is eerily linked to Paul being decapitated in a car crash where he lost his head. We have clues in songs like A Day in a Life and Don't Pass Me By, where the lyrics say he blew his mind out in a car and you were in a car crash and you lost your hair. As I have discussed in other presentations, Paul's raised eyebrow is symbolic of the Eye of Horus or the all-seeing eye. Then we factor in Aleister Crowley's Aeon of Horus, which Thelemites or Crowley acolytes, which includes the Illuminati, believe will foster in an age of self-realization and actualization, where there is a growth in the collective consciousness and love. Crowley also taught that to bring about the new age, the old must be destroyed, and we can see the chaos and dysfunction all around us today. It certainly appears we are in the midst of this alchemical process of change that the Luciferian controllers subscribe to. And to be clear, I am not advocating or espousing this doctrine, but simply offering my perspective on this philosophy. So the final point is this: the esoteric messages are hidden everywhere, even within the work of Street Viv. Now the next set of slides are from my December 2018 presentation, The Beatles, Paul McCartney, and the Grand Illusion. I included them because the Stanshall and Ackrill content is pertinent to this presentation. The content from the next two slides came from a professional artist who specializes in the human form. Let's hear what they had to say.
It's obvious Vivian is not a real person. The giveaway are the hands, shoulders, and overall body language. McCartney and Stanshall are the same person. Vivian and Billy have the same affected comical body language, head, hand, shoulder, and hip movements, as well as the same structure and rhythm of figure seen in the stance of the legs, hips, and shoulders. By studying the hands through various photographs, the fingernails are quite recognizable. The ring finger on the left hand is very discernible, so too are the fingertips, which are flattened and have a distinctive shape. They also have the same odd hollow on the cheeks. The other major giveaway is the right eye. They have obviously constructed the eyebrow ridge to try to mimic Paul McCartney. The real McCartney looked more beat up. He was more sturdy, tough, manly in his body movements. His facial features looked stressed, including his ears and cheeks. I am from Liverpool myself, and it may sound odd, but working-class Scousers have a certain mannerism and look. Vivian did not have it at all, and was actually quite effeminate. It is also really obvious from studying photographs and film footage that there are multiple stand-in Beatles.
Now let's take a look at some photo comparisons of Billy's version of Vivian. One mistake made by many looking into the McCartney conspiracy is overlooking the physical change in Stanshall himself. Vivian went from having a Scottish ruggedness to a more effeminate look. These dramatic changes in appearance evolved over a short period of time, not decades. So here we see two photos of Stanshall with the Bonzo Dog Band. Take a close look at the call-out images to the lower right of each picture. The photo on the left is what Bill looked like before surgery. The photo on the right is Bill after surgery, with makeup thrown in for good measure. If we set aside preconceived notions and maintain an objective mind, it should be obvious something very significant took place to alter Stanshall's appearance, and that something is surgery. So as we can see, in just a couple of years, Vivian Stanshall's transformation was not subtle. It was a drastic and permanent change in appearance, one that he would carry forward from this point on. On this slide, we have the revamped Stanshall in the center with an image of him playing McCartney on the left from the 1967 time period. To the far right is both images overlaid, and we can see it is an exact match. Notice the flare of the nostrils, the mouth and lip structure, and even the mustache. Along with the transformational progress from surgery, Bill is also donning a wig and using latex to round out the McCartney look. So between the surgery, latex, and cosmetics, his McCartney character comes to life. With this sequence of images, we can see how the facial features match up, starting with an older version of Bill on the left and moving across to the right to the older version of Stanshall. As the older-looking Stanshall, Bill relied on the use of latex to alter the nose, cheeks, and hairline, with the overall shape of the head remaining the same. This is no different than the makeup used to develop characters in movies and theater productions. From Wikipedia.
Foam latex is a lightweight, soft form of latex which is used in masks and facial prosthetics to change a person's outward appearance. The Wizard of Oz was one of the first films to make extensive use of foam latex prosthetics in the 1930s. Since then, it has been a staple of film, television, and stage productions, as well as finding use in a number of other fields. Its original formulation began in 1936 and was the work of makeup artist Charles Gamora.
Another question from some folks looking into the McCartney conspiracy is, who is the guy with the beaked nose? Well, the guy with the beaked nose is the same guy playing with the Bonzos. It's Billy. Here I have a screen capture showing the profile of Billy as Stanshall from a BBC program, and there's the nose. Once the surgeries were underway, there was work done to his nose to reduce the flare at the base by the nostrils, which was more prominent before surgery. So I think we can call this case closed. The beaked nose mystery has been solved. Here's another comparison of Bill as Stanshall and as McCartney. Take a moment and notice the similarities in the facial profile by following the arrows. In fact, pause the video if you would like to take the time to study the pictures. We have the same slope to the forehead, the same curve at the top of the nose between the eyes, the same profile of the overall shape of the nose, and the same chin and jawline. Even though these pictures are 50 years apart, A discerning eye can see this is the same person in both pictures. Here's another photo comparison of Bill. The picture on the left is obviously before surgery. Notice the overall shape of the face and the eyebrows compared to the McCartney photo. In the picture on the right, we can see the nose has been surgically altered to reduce the flare of Bill's nose by the nostrils. Over the years, the surgery and fillers are not holding up like it used to. This is due to age and the skin losing elasticity. Again, although these pictures are approximately 50 years apart, the base facial features can still be observed. Now let's recap some of the slides showing Bill's Stanshall character is indeed his McCartney character. Here's a slide showing 2 iterations of Stanshall with the Bonzo Dog Band. Again, pay close attention to the dramatic change in Stanshall's facial appearance. This is the same guy. The picture on the left is Stanshall before surgery, and on the right is after surgery. Notice how his face has become softer and more effeminate. Now let's take a look at the post-surgery Stanshall and the McCartney character. Focus on the overall shape of the head and the mouth. In the McCartney image, Bill is wearing a wig and latex has been utilized to mimic the McCartney look. It should also be noted the McCartney photo may have been taken after additional nose surgery. Although even if this is the case, we can still see the flare at the nostrils. Over time, additional surgery was performed to further reshape Billy's nose. Here again we have the same 2 pictures from the previous slide overlaid with each other. This is clearly the same person, with Bill's McCartney character donning latex, makeup, and a wig. The first image is Bill before surgery, the second is after surgery, and the third is Billy in his McCartney character. The giveaway showing that person number 1 is the same person as picture number 2 is the nose. It is the same nose with the flare at the nostrils. The face in the middle picture, or image number 2, has been rounded out with fillers, and although the eyes appear to have been altered, they still show similarities to Bill's natural eye shape. Also, if you look close enough, you can see the lines in the forehead are the same in picture number 1 and picture number 2. The image on the left is a photo of Billy sourced from a recent interview. Notice his eyes, especially the left eye which wanders, and also how the left eyelid has a slightly lazier look when compared to his right eye. And then notice the overall shapes of the face. We can also see where the flare of the nostrils in the left photo were surgically altered to be less prominent than the flare of the nostrils on the right, but the ball of the nose has the same look. This is Billy in both pictures. Now let's insert biological Paul's face into the mix and take a look and ask ourselves, when the person in image number 2 was younger, who does he look more like? Is it picture number 1 or picture number 3? For me, picture number 2 clearly goes with picture number 1. Therefore, it is my conclusion that Billy was indeed Vivian Stanshall and he is not biological Paul. To fully understand how latex can be used to transform a person to an entirely different look, let's watch this clip of Michael Jackson where his appearance is radically altered. In Memoirs, Billy tells us his son James looks very much like he did before all the surgeries. So let's take a moment and compare Bill to his son. Here we have the picture of Billy before the surgeries and a photo of his son James. There is certainly a family resemblance. The shape of the face, the complexion, and the color of the hair comes from his father. Very Scottish indeed. I also laid in a picture of Linda to show how James also has characteristics of his mother. For example, he has more of his mother's nose and her eye shape. Now let's move to the next slide and take a look at a young Billy without the mustache and compare him to his son. Here we have rare images of Billy without any facial hair. I converted the pictures of James to grayscale in order to normalize the comparison. It should be very obvious to anyone who's being objective that James has an uncanny resemblance to Bill. This is certainly strong evidence that James McCartney is the son of William Shepard and not the offspring of Bio Paul. In my opinion, This is possibly as close as we will get to a smoking gun proving that Billy is not James Paul McCartney. And to be fair, Bill tells us so by suggesting in memoirs that we make this comparison to help understand he is not Paul. The differences between Billy and biological Paul have become more obvious with the passing of time. In fact, I'm not even sure Bill is concerned with keeping up with the masquerade anymore. It's been a long run of over 50 years, and maintaining the facade has run its course, and most likely one of the main reasons Billy has decided to disclose. Now, before we finish up the Stanshall segment, let's take a look at a clue Billy gave us about his Vivian connection on Sgt. Pepper. To further show Bill was Stanshall, we could take a look at the Sgt. Pepper album cover. Sgt. Pepper was loaded up with Masonic clues from the geometry of where people are standing and looking with their eyes. But there is one clue in plain sight that few Paul is Dead researchers have noticed, and that is the instruments each Beatle is holding in their hands. All of these instruments are played by Billy. He is a wind instrument player by trade. We have John holding the French horn, Ringo the trumpet, George the piccolo, and Bill holding his English horn. If we go back to many of the old Stanshall videos, we will see Vivian playing all of these instruments. And then we have the Beatles introducing us to the one and only Billy Shears, where Shears is a play on the name Shepherd, as well as telling us Billy's here. And let's not forget Billy Pepper from the early 1960s band Billy Pepper and the Pepper Pots. And now let's switch gears and discuss Bill's other character, Phil Ackrill. Connecting the Phil Ackrill piece of the puzzle back to Billy is admittedly more of a challenge. This is due to several reasons. First, pictures of Ackrill are sparse. It appears that after 1963, he disappears. For example, when I did a Google search on Phil Ackrill in the 1970s, I found nothing but images comparing early 1960s headshots to McCartney. The images I did find are in the 1960 through 63 timeframe. It almost seems like he was scrubbed from the internet and dumped into the memory hole. Many of the images are small in size and the image quality is not great. This means when you attempt to zoom in, the images distort and become heavily pixelized, making it difficult to do comparisons. The other issue is, Phil was Billy before surgeries. So once Bill's surgeries began, in particular the fillers to round out the face, comparisons became a little challenging. However, we can still examine the eyes, nose, chin, and jawline to prove the case, and we will step through this in the upcoming slides. As we know, Memoirs makes the bold claim that Ackrill is not a real person, but a character played by Bill in the band The Diplomats with Denny Laine. Also, the updated edition of Memoirs tells us the Diplomats played on the same bill as the Beatles back in 1962 and shared the same dressing room. Memoirs also states that Bill, as Phil, did know biological Paul McCartney and was introduced to Paul by Denny Laine. This revelation is telling us that Billy was running in the same circles as the Beatles and was potentially in the pipeline for at least 4 years prior to 1966. Also, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, if all of this were not true, these statements could result in potential legal issues. For example, Phil Ackrill could pursue legal recourse in the form of a cease and desist order. The fact that 9 years has passed since the first edition of Memoirs, and the second edition is even more blatant about the Ackrill claim, it would seem that where there is smoke, there is fire. Now let's take a look at how the Ackrill clue was given to us in the first edition of Memoirs. As I mentioned, there is very limited information on Phil Ackrill, especially when it comes to the lack of quality images from his days with the Diplomats when he played with Denny Laine and Bev Bevan. It appears there was a concerted effort to scrub Ackrill's pictures from the internet, along with EMI never releasing an album the Diplomats recorded back in the early 1960s. In Memoirs, Billy tells us he did indeed play the character of Ackrill. The first edition of Memoirs is admittedly coy about the connection to Phil, but the second layer of encoding, which is represented by the bolded letters highlighted on this slide, reveals the truth with Billy telling us he, meaning Phil, was a fine person, I am them, meaning Billy was in the Diplomats. It's important to remember Bill and Denny have a long history and go way back. We can see proof of this when Billy formed Wings and reunited with his longtime friend. And speaking of Wings, Bill left us a Phil clue in the song Rock Show from his Venus and Mars album when he sings, "What's that man holding in his hand? He looks a lot like a guy I knew way back when. It's Silly Willie with the Philly band. Could be ooh-wee. Silly Willie is Silly Billy with the Philly or Phil Ackrill band, the Diplomats. Bill is Phil." Now let's revisit the Ackrill footnote on page 390 of the updated version of Memoirs.
William used the role of Phil Ackrill before giving it, attempting to lease it, to Phil Ralston, while reserving the option to still do performances occasionally and to give recording assistance. Ralston, the new Phil Ackrill, enthusiastically received the role in hopes of a recording contract. When that contract failed to materialize, William lost interest in the band, leaving the role entirely to Ralston, who later likewise became discouraged, quit the band, and pursued a career outside the music industry. Although William says he quote-unquote invented the Phil Ackrill role, the name appears to have been suggested to William by an associate of Ralston's mother. William's role as Vivian Stanshall likewise involved another performer, and was likewise less profitable than William intended. Unlike the Ackrill role, William never completely left the Stanshall role to another.
Here's an interesting image I found. Notice the name for Phil is not Ackrill, but it shows Phil Ralston, and Phil Ralston is listed at 6 feet 2 inches. As I have mentioned in previous presentations and shows, Bill in his prime was also 6 feet 2 inches, but because of age, his height is now an inch or two smaller, or around 6 feet in height. Now what's going on here? Why is Ralston's name on the playbill? My contention is this is Billy as a young man, but since Bill knew he was transitioning out of the Ackrill role, the switch from Ackrill to Ralston was underway. This was done to set the table and to acclimate the public to Phil Ralston taking over the role. In other words, this is another example of conditioning public perception. Most importantly, Ralston's name appearing on the playbill significantly strengthens the argument that Ackrill was not a real person, because if he were, it should be Ackrill's name appearing on the bill and not Ralston's. Here is a side-by-side comparison of Billy as Ackrill and Billy as Stanshall. The picture of the younger Billy on the left is from the very early 1960s. The image of Billy as Stanshall on the right is from around the mid-1960s. So we have approximately a 4 to 6 year difference in age. The wider face on the older Billy is the result of the fillers he was receiving to round out his face. However, even with the wider face, notice the shape of the eyes, the nose, and the elongated chin. In an upcoming slide, we will look at another comparison and we will see this is the same person. Periodically, I get sent this video as proof that Phil Ackrill is a real person. This quote-unquote proof consists of a caption with the name Phil Ackrill appearing in the clip and then the lead singer introducing this person as Ackrill. As we know, Memoirs tells us Phil Ackrill is a character or stage name and Billy and then Phil Ralston played the role. And in my previous slide, I showed a Diplomat's playbill with Phil Ralston's name on it, not Phil Ackrill's. This strongly suggests, as Memoirs states, that Ackrill is a character and not a real person. This video clip dates from 1992, which is 30 years after the dating of most of the Ackrill images found on the internet. Comparing people after 3 decades with little or no evidence in between is difficult at best. With Billy, we at least have images available to us throughout the timeline. Some watching this video might see a resemblance to Ackrill, but a resemblance does not mean they are the same person. It's also very odd that Denny Laine and Bev Bevan went on to rock and roll stardom. We have to ask ourselves, what happened to Phil Ackrill? Did fame and fortune elude him, or did he secure the grand prize of playing Paul McCartney? My contention is this: the person in this video is either Phil Ralston or another musician playing the role of Phil Ackrill. Here's a slide showing Billy as Phil with Denny Laine and the Diplomats, and then a later image of Billy reunited with Denny when he formed Wings. By the way, Denny's real name is Brian Hines. Denny Laine is a stage name. With these images, we can see the length of the eyebrow is the same between Ackrill and McCartney. The nose has the same overall shape. The difference in the flare at the base of the nose is the result of surgery, and the long chin and jawline is also apparent. The picture on the left is Phil Ackrill from the early 1960s, and the picture to the right is Stanshall circa 1966 or so. Notice the shape of the ear, the shape of the nose with the flare at the nostrils, and the jaw and chin line. In 1960, Bill was 23 years old. In 1966, he was almost 30, so we need to take into account 4 to 6 years of his face filling out due to age and then also because of the fillers. But even with several years in between the photos, the comparison, in my opinion, is very compelling. Now let's move to what I believe is a great comparison mapping the Ackrill character to the McCartney character. This comparison, in my opinion, is a gem. Take a look at the elongated chin and jawline, and then the nose and the smile. Even when we take into account the McCartney character has had surgery to lift the eyebrows, the eyes still look similar. Although these two pictures are approximately 10 years apart, the likeness is uncanny. This, in my opinion, is the same person. Feel free to pause the video to examine the facial features between these two images. Here's another set of photos comparing the body stance of Phil Ackrill to that of McCartney. Note the overall stance and posture. Now note the left hand, the leg positioning, the jaw and chin line, and the eyebrows. This is Billy playing both Phil Ackrill and Paul McCartney. Before we continue, I wanted to mention Phil's eyes, which at times are light in color and other times dark. Like foam latex, which has been around since the 1930s and used extensively in Hollywood and theater productions, it's important to note that contact lenses have been around a long time as well, going back to the late 1880s. As I noted on this slide, we can see steady progress was made over time, and by 1959, the contact lens evolved to what we would consider the modern-day lens. The question becomes, were colored contact lenses available to the deep state which Billy and the Beatles were part of? My guess is yes. For those of us who are involved in conspiracy and alternative research, we know that by the time technology rolls around to the general public, it has been in the hands of the controllers for years or decades before it gets rolled out to the masses. And so I believe it's very possible this could explain Ackrill and his different eye colors. I also found a picture of Phil Ackrill with dark hair. I included this image because it shows how the band, and Ackrill in particular, would change things up with cosmetics. And this is certainly something entertainers do, and have done, for a very long time. Before we get to the summary, I wanted to run this clip from the movie Yesterday, where many Paul is dead clues were hidden in plain sight. I will leave the links to two videos I did where I discussed the clues I noted in the film. There was one scene in the movie which dropped a Vivian Stanshall clue. The Stanshall character was also known by the alias Ginger Geezer. Therefore, Ginger Geezer and Vivian Stanshall are one and the same. In the movie, Ed Sheeran drops the Ginger Geezer clue in the kitchen scene while talking with the Jack Malek character. Let's take a listen.
Hi.
Hello.
I'm Ed. Is Jack there?
Oh, right, I'll see if he's there. Just wait there, then. Jack! It's for you.
Who's it?
His name's Ed. He's got a nice friendly face.
Hi. Hi. Can I come in? Your shirt's inside out. Christ. We should... Ouch. So, look, I'm sorry to barge in like this.
No, major pop stars always dropping round, you know. Lady Gaga won't leave us alone.
You're funny.
Oh, funny looking at least.
Yeah, so anyway, I live locally and I saw your song on TV and it was really good.
Well.
So I googled you and I listened to your songs on the Warehouse website and they were even better.
Gosh, thanks.
Alright, don't mind me.
So I've had the support acts drop out of the European leg of the tour and I was wondering if you'd consider it.
Consider what?
Yeah, being the opening act.
For you, seriously?
No?
Yeah, why not?
What? When will I start?
Tuesday?
Do you know where the pickle is?
No.
No.
What, Tuesday, not next July?
No, Tuesday. Is your hearing alright?
No, my hearing's fine, it's just you keep saying lots of really strange things, but yes. Thank you, yes. How long do you need?
About 30 minutes, maximum. Any more than that, people start getting a bit restless, you know. Bring on the Ginger Geezer.
Get in.
Any more than that, people start getting a bit restless, you know. Bring on the Ginger Geezer.
Get in.
How long do you need? About 30 minutes, maximum. Any more than that, people start getting a bit restless, you know. Bring on the Ginger Geezer.
Get in.
So we have to ask ourselves, why was Ginger Geezer mentioned in the movie Yesterday? The reason is because the film is loaded up with Paul is dead clues, and one of those clues? Well, Billy played the role of Vivian Stanshall, who was also known as Ginger Geezer. Before we conclude with my closing thoughts, I thought I would share a Paul is Dead clue that Billy dropped on his McCartney 2 album. I would like to thank my friend and fellow researcher Victoria for bringing this clue to my attention. When we look at Billy's McCartney 2 album cover, we see two shadows, one to the left of his head and one to the right. Billy is in the middle, representing the integration of those two parts, or the integration of Billy and biological Paul. In other words, Billy is Paul and Paul is Billy. Also, Paul's birthday was June 18, 1942, making him a Gemini. Gemini is known as the twins, and the symbol for Gemini looks like the Roman numeral for 2. So McCartney 2 is about McCartney the twin, or about a very good double named Billy. In summary, the McCartney conspiracy is a highly complex psychological operation. It involves actors, doubles, lookalikes, plastic surgery, latex, cosmetics, etc. By placing actors within the context of certain narratives, most people look past the obvious discrepancies and adopt the controller's desired storyline. Critical thinking and discernment clearly shows Billy is not biological Paul, but because Billy is shown within the context of the Beatles, he is Paul. Otherwise, who else would he be? The same is true for the Stanshall and Ackrill characters. There were at least 2 different people playing Vivian, with one being Billy and the other an actor on Billy's payroll. Billy as a young man also played the character Phil Ackrill, who was in the band The Diplomats, which included Denny Laine and Bev Bevan. To ensure that Ackrill could coexist with the McCartney role in the same way Stanshall did, Billy leased the character out to Phil Ralston, who played Ackrill until the role fizzled out. From the very beginning, Bill has been telling us he is not biological Paul. He's been dropping Paul is Dead clues since at least 1967 and is still doing so today. Mr. Shears has been hiding the truth in plain sight. And that concludes the presentation. The comment section is open. Please feel free to share your thoughts and feedback, and thanks for listening.